I'd say the verdict now is clear. Capitalism really sucks. Privatizing everything for years left most of us out of luck. The dreams most of us once had are dead. The jobs around don't pay. Heck, I barely have a roof over my head. And I've heard most of my neighbors say, if this is the glory of the market, Tent City, USA, then let's take this powder keg and spark it. After all, it's the American way. Let us now look through a different prism. Let us work for the common good. Let us put an end to capitalism. Let us do now as we should. And kick it while it's down. 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 The capitalists are parasites, the bane of society. They don't give a crap for human rights. All they care about is money. The billionaires buy the Congress, then they make up all the rules. So if voting is no way to seek redress, then we must use other tools. And kick it while it's down. 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 Half the country is in drought, burning up and blowing away. It's a climate crisis, there's no doubt, but be that as it may. The market says it's time to drill for oil. The market says cut down all the trees. The market says build pipelines neath the soil. But in recent years the market's on its knees. So kick it while it's down. 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 So kick it while it's down, kick it while it's down, kick it while it's down. We need solar panels, not coal mines. We need food, not bombs. But the market doesn't care about the bread lines or your hungry mom. The market only cares about the market. What's behind the guarded gate? So you can take your limousine and park it. Trade it in for a welfare state. And kick it while it's down, kick it while it's down, kick it while it's down. Kick it while it's down, kick it while it's down, kick it while it's down. Kick it while it's down, kick it while it's down, kick it while it's down. Kick it while it's down, kick it while it's down, kick it while it's down.
Good day, evening, morning, whatever it is to you. This is David Rovix, and you have tuned in here or downloaded or whatever my musical history of free trade special broadcast. I was calling it a brief musical history of free trade, but I guess as broadcasts go, it's not going to be very brief, since half the songs I've ever written are about free trade, and I'm not even including most of them, but so it may or may not be a brief broadcast, but it will commence shortly, or I guess it sort of has commenced, but this is the improvised portion of it where I just say hello and say especially hello to all those people in the chat room. Jack there listening from Bhopal, India, which is indeed the perfect place to be listening from for this broadcast especially. And hopefully the reason why will become clear if anybody knows why Bhopal is significant, and if you don't, then Google that, because you should. And for those of you who, I'll just make my little pitch now, and then I'll get on with the broadcast. If you want to support what I'm doing with these broadcasts, or with getting to the next protest and writing songs and whatever else, then you are very welcome to go to davidrovics.com and click on the donate button or the subscribe button and become a subscriber, like I think most of the people listening at the moment are. But if you're not and you've got a job and you can afford to be, then feel free to join their illustrious ranks. And I will now commence with the show such as it is, which is actually this time more or less. I actually wrote it out in terms of what I was going to say and everything. So, but maybe I'll diverge from the script. Who knows? Anyway, here we go. For the past few millennia, much of the world has been gripped in the throes of bloody conflict between the haves and the have-nots. For the past few centuries, the haves have primarily been represented by national governments and massive corporations and have sold themselves as believers in democracy and free trade. Individual freedom and economic freedom is how they sell it. In the real world, this is all just a line, and the ruling classes have supported democracy or dictatorship, free trade or protectionism randomly, depending on whether it was advantageous to them at the time. These days, they're trying to pass the biggest, baddest international agreements ever, the TPP and the TTIP, which will, if passed, further destroy local democracy and will result in a huge transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top in the guise of supporting, quote, free trade, like usual in recent years. I thought I'd give you a little musical history of trade, free or otherwise, its promoters and its opponents. During the early 18th century, Great Britain was a very dominant military and economic power. Part of Britain's successes lay in imposing severe restrictions on which countries the British colonies were allowed to trade with. Namely, you could only trade with them, and anyone else was liable to get their ship sunk by the British Navy. So the pirates of the golden age of piracy, mostly British subjects of African descent, sank the ships of British merchants, as well as their French and Spanish competitors.
This is a song about a very militant social movement that had its golden age in the beginning of the 17th century. Come all you sailors near and far, you honest men know who you are. All of you who dare be free, combine with us upon the sea. Together we will drink a toast, ride the wind on down the coast, see the merchant shipped aboard, raise a jar and swing a sword, watch to see the merchant captain crying when they see the black flag flying. The war with Spain is over now, no more Jack over the bow. We fight for no one but our class, we're gonna kick some captain's ass. All you who'd live before you die, come give an honest life a try. Sail beneath the skull and bones, pay no heed to crowns and thrones. No more greedy princes lying when you come sail with a black flag flying. No more whips and no more chains, to live free or die is what remains. If life is too short either way, you might as well live free today. All for one and one for all, we'll board the ship and make the call. Join us, all you good men, and have your liberty again. Watch the crew now leave their captain frying as they come sail with the black flag flying. Flying Roberts brave and true, and Mary Kelly's gallant crew. Seems to me the world is ours, watch as the mighty Navy cowers. We have no nation but the sea, no creed but that we will live free. Loot and burn all that we can, that's run by a dishonest man. Their end is near, there is no denying when they see the black flag flying. If I could predict the future, then I would. But all I know is this is good. 1720 is the year. There is nothing left to fear. We may live or we may die, perhaps our destiny is nigh. I don't know what the end may hold, but I know these ships are filled with gold that was stolen from the poor as we lay dying. So let us sail with a black flag flying.
If you happen to be one of the folks listening to this show live, then I highly recommend you join the chat room, because it's already just a few minutes into the show. It's already a fascinating bunch of folks from all over the world, as usual. Taxation without representation and British restrictions on colonial trade were two of the main reasons that spurred on the American Revolution. But promises by extremely wealthy slaveholders like George Washington that things would improve under the new government didn't pan out. Tenant farmers made the revolution and then came back to the same greedy landlords that they had before. They went out to fight, kill, and die for the cause. Their 3-year revolt led directly to the Bill of Rights being passed, though, as with so many other laws, these 10 constitutional amendments have always been only very selectively enforced.
I was raised in Massachusetts on the farm where I was born. Ever since I was a young lad, to the fields I was sworn. Before our corn could go to market, it was stolen from the mill and sent to Mother England from here in the Berkshire Hills. So when I heard there'd be a rising, I put on a uniform, slept barefoot in the mud beneath thunderstorms. In war there is no glory, just friends and comrades killed, shattered lives and broken homes here in the Berkshire Hills. In the Continental Army, the years dragged on and on. With the French, we fought the Redcoats, so many people dead and gone. Ticonderoga, they surrendered. We had won this test of wills, and those of us left alive came back here to the Berkshire Hills. Then began the nightmare all over once again. Revolutions, debtors' prisons filled with good, upstanding men. We said to hell with King John Adams. Of this farce we'd had our fill, and we set our sights on liberty here in the Berkshire Hills. Couldn't function, their judges on the run. Each new day we had our farms
was a victory we'd won. For years we kept our land, held our ground until we made our last stand by Great Barrington. Here in the Berkshire Hills, my name is Danielle Shays, and I'm speaking to you now. If I fought a revolution, maybe you can tell me how. I was born a poor man, and I'm a poor man still. Bury me beneath the hemlock here in the Berkshire Hills.
Half a century later, life still had not improved significantly under the revolutionary government. Despite the supposed advantages of sovereignty and fewer trade restrictions, the rich still owned most everything, while the poor majority in the USA led short and difficult lives. The tenant farmers of upstate New York revolted, and for 9 years they refused to pay the rent to the oligarchs of Dutch descent who had inherited the land they lived on over the generations, since the Dutch crown had first granted it to themselves. It was in reaction to the rent strike wars of upstate New York that the U.S. Congress passed the Homestead Act of 1862, which is largely responsible for creating the phenomenon of small farmers and small business people, which came to be known as the middle class.
Patroons came from Holland to America, became landlords where none had been before. Soon one man owned 500,000 acres on both sides of the Hudson River shore. He invited families to move in and give him 30% of everything they grew every year. This is how they'd pay the rent. His name was Rensselaer. He became one of the richest men on earth. In today's terms, $90 billion is how much he'd be worth. All this for doing nothing but saying all of this was his. I have the power of the state behind me, and I'm in the landlord biz. After 200 years of this and one revolution, another Rensselaer had another son. And this Rensselaer was greedier than his ancestors dead and past. It was the 1840s, and things were changing fast. It was the straw that broke the back. The bottle was uncorked. They started organizing meetings, the tenant farmers of New York. They found the strength of numbers. They found the power of suggestion. They found each other asking the same question. Who gave you the right to be a landlord? To live a life of ease while others toil? Who gave you the right to be a rich man while the rest of us pay you so we can work this soil? They vowed they would stop the rent collection. They vowed they'd bring this madness to an end. And when one blew the tin horn of distress, he soon found he had 1,000 friends. With calico skirts, masks upon their faces, on horseback, armed with knives and guns. They chanted and they yelled and they kept their farms and they kept the sheriffs on the run. They asked, who gave you the right to be a landlord? To live a life of ease while others toil? Who gave you the right to be a rich man while the rest of us pay you so we can work this soil? governors, militias tried to stop them, but nothing could be done to break their will. And by 1848 the landlords buckled, sold their holdings to the farmers in the hills. Yes, they overthrew this feudal system, but it's replaced now by speculators and banks. And you can still hear the homeless families asking of all the landed gentry in our ranks, who gave you the right to be a landlord, to live a life of ease while others toil? Who gave you the right to be a rich man, while the rest of us pay you so we can work this soil? Who gave you the right to be a landlord, to live a life of ease while others toil? Who gave you the right to be a rich man, while the rest of us pay you so we can work this soil? Who gave you the right?
The Opium Wars were two of many examples of the enforcement of trade policy through the barrel of a gun. There was a great thirst for Chinese products in Britain, especially tea, but British industry had little to offer that the Chinese wanted. So Britain, with the help from France, the United States, and Russia, attacked China, burned cities, killed tens of thousands of civilians, and forced the emperor to sign a treaty giving British merchants the right to sell massive quantities of a heretofore illegal and highly addictive opium to the Chinese people.
Let me tell you a tale, stir a hornet's nest, well remembered in the East, most forgotten in the West. It was the 1830s, and the Industrial Revolution was turning Europe into a land of wage slaves and air pollution. The history books tell us it was the era of free trade, and the entire world hungered for the products Europe made. Merchants plied their wares across the 7 seas, and they brought back things like porcelain, silk, and tea. Soon all the tea in China could barely keep the West awake. Such a thirst for Chinese products as could barely be slaked. They liked to drink their tea in cups of Chinese porcelain, and those who could afford it loved the silk upon their skin. But what made the merchants and the monarchs scream and cry and shout? They seemed to have little to offer that China could live without. They didn't want their muskets and they didn't want their wool, which left the British coffers empty and the Chinese coffers full. And they called it a trade war. They call it a trade war, and I guess that could be so. They say it's not free trade if it's just a one-way flow, because apparently free trade is when the West comes out ahead. That's how it is in practice, though that's never what is said. The fact of history they'd have a sweep under the rug. The one thing they could sell in China was an addictive drug. It had long been banned by Chinese law, but the British didn't care. They packed the opium up in crates and they shipped it there. And they called it a trade war. It all came to a head in 1838. When the soldiers of the emperor torched 20,000 crates. It took 3 days to burn it, and when the fires had gone out, the Chinese people would soon learn what free trade was all about. Navies came from Britain, France, and the USA. In blood, land, and silver they would make the Chinese pay. Cities leveled, thousands killed. The war was 3 years long. That's how they opened China. That's how they got Hong Kong. And they called it a trade war. And they called it a trade war. And they called it a trade war.
The American Revolution was led in part by slave owners who wanted freedom from trade restrictions imposed by Britain. The Southern states' secession that led to the American Civil War was led by slave owners who wanted freedom from trade restrictions imposed by the Northern-dominated federal government. This was far from the only blatant instance of slavery and, quote, free trade being bedfellows.
Owen Brown was an abolitionist. John was Owen's son. He grew up in New England. He was born in Torrington. John Brown was a tanner and a man of many skills. He stood up for the workers who toiled in the mills. He stood up for the Indians. He stood up for the women, for the oppressed and the exploited. This good man stood with them. So when Kansas was bleeding, he went and joined the fray. If the slave trade wanted Kansas, the slave trade would have to pay. Riding on the Kansas prairie with a fine and loyal band. Glory, hallelujah. Beecher's Bible in his hand. Glory, hallelujah. Beecher's Bible in his hand. With 2,000 of New England's best and bravest sons, Captain Brown fought in Kansas with a Bible and a gun. When free Lawrence was on fire, lighting up the night, the border ruffians would flee. John Brown would stand and fight. Lincoln called him a fanatic, and he was a Christian who thought you could do unto others as you'd have others do unto you. Christ said, love your neighbor, and if your neighbor's held in slavery, he was one who felt his duty was to fight to set them free. Riding on the Kansas prairie with a fine and loyal band. Glory, hallelujah. Beecher's Bible in his hand. Glory, hallelujah. Beecher's Bible in his hand. Drove the slave trade out of Kansas, then went to bordering Missouri. Raided the plantations, no compromise, said he. Broke the chains and shackles, rode at night to Canada. Out of this nightmare, the devil's home, America. He was caught in Harper's Ferry, his family lying dead. They questioned him for hours as he lay there and bled. They hanged him on the gallows, they laid him in his grave. John Brown was a Christian, and he died to free the slave. Riding on the Kansas prairie with a fine and loyal band. Glory, hallelujah. Beecher's Bible in his hand. Glory, hallelujah. Beecher's Bible in his hand.
During the period that became known as the Coal Mine Wars, the freer the trade was, the worse things were for the miners of West Virginia. Without any government protections in place, the many coal mine operators in West Virginia had to compete on the open market with coal from Illinois and elsewhere, which was much cheaper to produce and get to market since Illinois is flat and West Virginia, or at least was, completely mountainous. In order to compete on the open market, they kept wages lower in West Virginia than anywhere else. Problem was, that meant starvation for the miners, so they rebelled, organized strikes, fought, and did all the other things that workers have to do in order to survive when the purveyors of free trade rule the land.
1921 was the year. Seems like yesterday to me. Let me tell you about what happened then, back in the mine country. We were fighting hard to build a union, 'cause at 40 cents a ton, there was no way to feed a family when the mining day was done. The strike had lasted for a year when they shot down Smiling Sid. He was a lawman who stood up for us miners. That's the only crime he ever did. 100 miners locked up with no trial there in Mingo Town. But the last straw came in Sharples when they gunned the women down. Now we're marching on to Mingo, 10,000 men and counting, here in the hills of West Virginia. At the Battle of Blair Mountain. We shouted through the hillsides in every Union hall. We're marching on to Mingo, teach them a lesson once and all. Commandeered every freight train to the Kentucky line. Took every car that crossed our path and all the guns and ammo we could find. The Union leaders tried to stop us. Mother Jones told us to turn back, but we had learned ourselves from the gun thugs. There's a time to talk and a time to attack. We had no leader, we didn't need one. We all knew our way through Logan County. We all knew once we got there, we're gonna hang Sheriff Chapin from a sour apple tree. We're marching on to Mingo, 10,000 men and counting, here in the hills of West Virginia. At the Battle of Blair Mountain. For 3 days and nights we fought them. The front was 10 miles wide. Every cop and scab in West Virginia was there on the other side. They dropped explosives from their airplanes, such a thing you never saw. They shot us with machine guns. It was the operator's law. We dug trenches and wore helmets that we brought from the Argonne. All the way from France to Logan, we fought from dusk to dawn. President Harding sent in the army, and we left our line to them. But the hills of West Virginia will long remember when we were marching on to Mingo, 10,000 men and counting, here in the hills of West Virginia. At the Battle of Blair Mountain.
After the unregulated U.S. economic system bounced along for decades and then collapsed almost entirely with the stock market crash of 1929 and subsequent period known as the Great Depression, the only thing that helped mollify the extremely stratifying effect of these conditions were things like taxation and government spending on social programs. And other things that today would be called non-tariff barriers to trade, such as labor unions.
Back in the Depression, farmers held the line. When the bank came for an auction, together they'd combine. They knew that when divided, they could never win. But they stood shoulder to shoulder, didn't let the bankers in. They stood shoulder to shoulder,
That's how they kept their farms. If one of them was threatened, it was for all to be alarmed. They said this was their land and they'd help each other stay. That's how they kept their farms. That's why the bankers went away. 'Cause the union makes us strong. The union makes us strong. Back in the Depression, there was not enough to eat. But the union of the unemployed was in the driver's seat. If the cops did an eviction, took the bed and put it out, the neighbors would carry it in, sing a song and shout, the union makes us strong. The union makes us strong. I can hear him talking, you've gotta look at the long view. Back in the Depression, almost everybody knew competition was so great, why don't they do it with themselves? Instead of buying off the Congress and ruling by cartel, the union makes us strong. The union makes us strong. During the Depression, people fought and won back then. Now the battle's global and it must be won again. They will try to divide us, but even on the darkest day, when I listen closely, I hear a billion people say, the union makes us strong. The union makes us strong. The union makes us strong. The union makes us strong.
One of the long-standing problems with the advocates of, quote, free trade is that the biggest and most influential among them have no allegiance to any particular government or people, so they tend to play governments off against each other for their own benefit. A prime example of this was Ford, which hedged their bets during World War II and built tanks for both the U.S. and Nazi Germany, making sure that the more people who got killed and the longer the war took, the more money they'd make, regardless of who came out on top.
Ford sued the U.S. Army, the U.S. government in the 50s because during the war, the U.S. Air Force bombed their tank-making facilities in Germany. And this is true. And what was it, like 52 or something? They sued the U.S. government for destroying their factories. And they won. They won the lawsuit. So I had to write a little song for Henry here. Ford built tanks for the Nazis, and the Nazis used those tanks to gun down lots of soldiers in the U.S. Army ranks. Yes, Henry Ford was a fascist, and a nasty one was he. He built tanks for anyone for the proper fee. Henry Ford spoke to his lackeys, and he said, "Isn't this great? We'll attack our enemies and we'll retaliate." Yes, Henry Ford was a fascist and a cunning liar too. A brown shirt with a swastika draped in red, white, and blue. Henry Ford spoke to his workers and he said, "You dare not strike. You must be patriotic and take on my Third Reich." Yes, Henry Ford was a fascist and he had not a care about the dying soldiers that made him a billionaire. Ford built tanks for the Nazis and he built many more to gun down lots of peasants in Peru and Salvador. Yes, Henry Ford was a fascist, I heard that when he died, the last words to leave his lips was Arbeit macht frei. Yes, the dollar was his icon, on whichever shore. And Henry's only motto was make money and make war. Yes, Henry Ford was a fascist. That's all I have to say. I will spit on Henry's rotting grave until my dying day. Yes, Henry Ford was a fascist. That's all I have to say. I will spit on Henry's rotting grave until my dying day.
Since long before the First Opium War, free trade has been used as a fig leaf for naked imperialism. Claiming it was unfair for the taxpayers of Chile to buy and own their own country's finite resources from the foreign corporations that had previously controlled them, the U.S. undermined and ultimately arranged to overthrow the democratically elected socialist government of Salvador Allende, putting into power a free trade-friendly dictatorship that tortured and killed thousands of people and ran Chile's economy into the ground all at the same time. The foreign corporations made a lot of money, though.
As I looked out my window at the clear blue sky, at the planes that flew so low, at the smoke that rose so high, the air filled up with dust that blackened out the sun, and the politicians went on about the new day that had begun. And when I looked at my calendar, I knew it would be so. It was on this day in Santiago. Less than 30 years had passed, and how clearly I remember what the city had been like before that day in September. There were doctors on the sidewalks helping those in need, students in the barrios teaching children how to read. There were milk trucks in the shanties driving to and fro. On this day in Santiago, I could tell you about the rallies, the whole city in the street. The president was speaking and we all were on our feet. Allende was the future, destitution was the past. The city was in motion and things were changing fast. Just how fast they were changing, only Kissinger could know. On this day in Santiago, Anaconda Copper and Nixon got their dream, a country torn apart, ruptured at the seam. A fascist coup was what they wanted, and that's just what they'd get when they sent down from Fort Benning General Pinochet. Lady Liberty hung her head down low. On this day in Santiago, they dropped bombs on La Moneda with jet planes from D.C. They killed 5,000 people in our city by the sea. A reign of terror started when they cut off Victor's hands. The rivers clogged with bodies and our blood drenched the sands. And I remember wondering which way future winds might blow. On this day in Santiago,
while Allende was in power in Chile, the U.S. was busy making the Chilean economy scream, to quote Henry Kissinger. The U.S. had been trying for over half a century to do the same thing to Cuba, but the project to isolate Cuba economically and politically ran into more snags, such as countries like the Soviet Union, Canada, Mexico, and most of Europe refusing to go along with the U.S.'s program to overthrow the Cuban government because they don't embrace, quote, free trade, and had the audacity to nationalize some of their own resources after overthrowing the odiously corrupt and brutal Batista dictatorship in 1959.
Who can tell me which country on earth has the most bicycle riders per capita and the most organic farms per capita?
Cuba. Cuba.
Cuba. You win. Not to mention the highest living standard in Latin America.
Screens in the windows.
And they're the one, and screens in the windows, which is remarkable in a region where everybody else is getting malaria. The Cubans are not, for the simple innovation of having screens in the windows. I was there, and it's really a remarkable place, and how they can do so much with so little. Because importing everything, thanks to the U.S. embargo for Cuba, is about something like 3 times as expensive as it is for most of Latin America to import anything. And this is a small island nation that cannot possibly produce everything they need. And yet, in spite of this, they maintain the highest living standard of Latin America, and the only country in all of the Americas, I guess with the conceivable possible exception of Canada, that actually has universal health care and universal education to the university level, and a lot of other neat things that I won't go into. But this is a song inspired by Jesse Helms. I saw her in the city center with a thermos full of coffee, making the local brew on a street called Salvador Allende. Gave her a peso and took a sip and sat beneath the palm tree. It's so easy to be a criminal when you're trading with the enemy. I sat down on a park bench beside a statue of John Lennon, and to see the children dancing, it's so easy to imagine a world without borders, here so close to Miami, as I smoke a cigarro popular, once more trading with the enemy. Biking down a country road, only one of many others. The people call me compañero, and they greet me as a brother. One man has a basket full of mangoes. Now I'm sure Jesse would agree. With each bite I undermine my country by trading with the enemy. Watch the oxen pull the carriage, and the organic farms abound. All the fertilizer's gone, but there are other ways to feed the ground. Inspiring the world with the strength of creativity. See the past and future come together, trading with the enemy. And I just want to tell you that the enemy's so lovely, such a proud and beautiful people, from the mountains to the sea, from the clinics to the schoolyards, Che Guevara to Marti. We have only our chains to lose by trading with the enemy.
So folks in the chat room are talking about experiences they had visiting Cuba, and I remember one story that Dave Blakeney told me. I can't remember if I'm sure it's not a confidential thing or anything, but here we are on the internet. But Dave told me about when he was first went to visit Cuba, and he was the elected national representative of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. And he went to Cuba and was just basically going on his own, but he sort of as an afterthought asked the union if, like, I guess the leadership minded if he went as an official representative of the union, and they said yes. And it turned out that it was the first visit from a major Canadian union to Cuba in since the revolution or something like that, and so they made it a big state event and basically literally rolled out the red carpet for him or something. Like they definitely made a big deal out of it, regardless of the details. And they arranged for him to have a little 15-minute meeting with Fidel, and so he had not been expecting that, and he was apparently Fidel was kind of sleepy, and Dave was not impressing him with his his saying nice things about him and his revolution. Fidel had heard that before, apparently, and was looking like he was going to fall asleep. And then Dave remembered a story about that he heard that he didn't think many people had talked to Fidel about, which was a little-known incident that happened at Pearson International Airport in Toronto one winter when Fidel was switching planes there and was fascinated with the snow blowers, and which they don't have in Cuba. And someone working at the airport apparently noticed his fascination with the snow plows and snow removal equipment and offered to give him a ride around the airport on one of those devices. And so that was that woke Fidel up, apparently, that memory, which he wasn't expecting. So I'll continue. Once the U.S. labor movement had largely been wiped out and the transnational free trade corporations were firmly in control in the U.S. and elsewhere, the new norm became a massive trade deficit between the U.S. and China, with Chinese sweatshops producing 70% of the products sold on the shelves of the world's biggest corporation, Walmart. Walmart became iconic in the new economy, a physical representation of the race to the bottom that free trade sets into motion, with some of the world's lowest paid workers producing the products in countries with very bad standards for labor or civil rights, with very lax environmental regulations, while the lowest of the low-paid workers in the consuming countries sell those outsourced imported products.
There's 1,000 acres becoming clear. Cut down the forest, the big one's here. Cover the ground with a mass of tar. Make sure there's room for every car. 1 floor, half mile, massive sprawl. 1 store wonder, super mall. It's spreading out far and wide, taking over the countryside. Say goodbye to your forests, they're going down. Walmart is coming to town. Your sons and daughters will have a fit at the mountains of plastic shit. Chinese prisoners will sweat and bleed, and you'll get all the stuff you need. Walton's children, profits reap, buying low and selling cheap. And what happens to mom and pop? Turn the key and close the shop. Say goodbye to your city, it's shutting down. Walmart is coming to town. There goes the local department store. See the diner shut its door. No more neighbors you can meet. More ghosts than people on the street. No more jobs with living pay. Sam Walton took it all away. Beneath the lights they'll work you bare. The lucky ones can get on welfare. Forget your children's cap and gown. Walmart is coming. Walmart is coming. Walmart is coming to town.
The flip side of outsourcing manufacturing jobs has been to try hard to force workers inside the U.S. into a race to the bottom, competing for ever scarcer jobs that pay ever lower wages. A big part of that process has always involved a vibrant black economy of millions of undocumented workers, which the ruling class makes sure to keep in a state of fear at all times, so that they keep working but don't organize, and so that they are always available to be used against those who do try to organize, always available as a scapegoat for everything: crime, poverty, the availability of illegal drugs, you name it.
This song goes out, I guess, more now than ever to the Arab American community, but I wrote it more with Latin Americans in mind. Of course, so many folks are in the same boat, hopefully not soon facing indefinite detention for being immigrants. The clouds gather in your forests,
drift to my desert town. I think of far-off places as the rain is coming down. You're bent down in the fields, picking fruit there from the vine, and it ends up on my table as it moves on down the line. The moon shines brightly in the night sky. The river flows from south to north. With the changing of the seasons, the birds migrate back and forth. They say that you can't come here, not in the light of day. Somebody has got plans for you. Starve at home or hide away. Will we open up the borders? Tear down the prison walls. Declare that no one is illegal. Watch the giant as it falls. So much travels across these borders. So much is bought and sold. One way goes the gunships, the other comes the gold. Free trade is like a needle, drawing blood straight from your heart. The border's like a prison, keeping friends apart. Will we open up the borders? Tear down the prison walls. Declare that no one is illegal. Watch the giant as it falls. Hear the stockholders cheering. The world's getting smaller. Hear the drowning child crying. Why are the fences growing taller? Some whisper in the shadows, while others count the dollars. Some have suits and ties, others chains and collars. Will we open up the borders? Tear down the prison walls. Declare that no one is illegal. Watch the giant as it falls. May these fortress walls come down. May we meet our sisters and our brothers. Stand arm in arm there in the daylight, no longer fighting one another. Will we stand together? For therein lies our might. Will we understand these words? Workers of the world unite. Will we open up the borders? Tear down the prison walls. Declare that no one is illegal. Watch the giant as it falls. Open up the borders. Tear down the prison walls. Declare that no one is illegal. Watch the giant as it falls.
With the rise of the concept of privatizing resources that had long been publicly managed, and the rise of the concept of intellectual property and copyright, all sorts of new battlefronts emerged in the struggle between the haves and the have-nots. The land once held in common among the peasantry in places like England and Scotland had long ago been enclosed and claimed by the ruling classes. In recent decades, the new emphasis has been on privatizing the water that falls from the sky, the seeds farmers plant, our genes, and our culture.
First you told us only through you could we know God, and if we dared to question, he wouldn't spare the rod. For you we worked the soil, For you we dug the moors, for you we shed our blood and fought so many pointless wars. And now you try to tell us there's nothing we can do. You say the world around us belongs fairly to the few, but about 6 billion people no doubt will agree this world is our home, not your property. It's the commons, our right of birth. And you who would enclose the land all around the earth, our future is your downfall when we cut this ball and chain. You who've sacrificed the public good for your private gain. With our sweat we built the railroads, built cities on these shores, but because you own the money, you say that it's all yours. We laid the phone lines and the pipelines, and then right before our eyes, you say these things are taxes paid for. You now will privatize. Privatize the hospitals, privatize the schools, privatize the prisons for all those who break your rules. And preparing for the day when all the wells run dry, you say you own the very rain that falls down from the sky. But it's the commons, our right of birth. And you who'd own the water all around the earth, our future is your downfall when they cut this ball and chain. You who'd sacrifice the public good for your private gain. You claim to own the harvest with your Terminator seeds. You claim to own the genomes of every animal that breeds. You claim to own our culture and the music that we play. And with each song that we download, to your coffers we must pay. You'd even own my name, and you'd say it's for the best. Maybe you'll let us on your radio if our songs can pass your test. You own country, you own western, you say you've given us a choice. You may own the airwaves, but you'll never own my voice. It's the commons, our right of birth. And you who'd own the music all around the earth, our future is your downfall when you cut this ball and chain. You who'd sacrifice the public good for your private gain. It's the commons, our right of birth. And you who would own everything all around the earth, our future is your downfall when you cut this ball and chain. You who'd sacrifice the public good for your private gain.
One of the many negative aspects of privatizing and deregulating everything in the image of some twisted idea of freedom is that not only does the whole process dramatically intensify both the extremes of poverty as well as wealth and gut the so-called middle class, but it causes the atomization of society in other ways. For example, if it's more profitable for the big corporations to drive a private automobile than to take mass transit, and it's more profitable to have all the stores located in a big mall outside of town rather than to fix up Main Street, then so be it. The result of all this has been what has come to be known as urban decay, which the ruling class of course likes to blame on some combination of African Americans and immigration. Of course, it's the free traders who created the mess, not the victims of free trade.
I was young once, was a long time ago. Things were different then, I thought you should know. This old building was once a factory. We made Stetsons, your grandpa and me. It wasn't easy, but at least life was going down. There used to be a city in this town. Rusted rail yard had a hotel and a couple of stores. We had good times here between the wars. Wasn't paradise, but there was music in the street. Right there's where your grandparents first had a chance to meet. They got married in that church. I can still see her wedding gown. There used to be a city in this town. When the
change came, it started one by one. First the layoffs, then the factory was gone. Then came the highways, suburbs and Walmart. That was the final blow that tore this place apart. But it seems like just last year, when there were people all around, there used to be a city in this town. Census says there's people here, but I think someone's confused. Just look out at these sidewalks, they're not being used. You know, when a city dies, it doesn't die with grace. It just becomes a ruin, shouting this was once the place. I guess it's time to leave, but I don't know where I'd be bound. There used to be a city in this town. There used to be a city in this town. There used to be a city in this town. There used to be a city in this town.
The last few years of the 20th century saw the rise globally of a movement against world domination by transnational corporations and their bought-off governments. There were many large and militant protests as well as lots of community organizing throughout North America and Europe, and in Latin America, one government after another was freed from the shackles of the International Monetary Fund by left-wing governments coming to power, most notably in oil-rich Venezuela. 4 years after his landslide electoral victory, Hugo Chavez was overthrown by a coup with U.S. assistance. Millions of people poured into the streets, however, and blockaded the entrances of all the military bases. The coup plotters relented, and Chavez came back, and continued implementing the social programs that have made such a difference to the lives of so many people in Venezuela and throughout Latin America.
For the moment, the horizon is on fire, democracy rising. Balanced on a wire, liberation. You can smell it in the air, things are moving. And the rich are all aware. Some will talk along the sidelines, others they will do. Sing a song for Chavez before the coup. For the moment, the airwaves are live on the radio. Barrios have arrived, Cuban doctors, in their thousands on the street, in the shanty towns. They're pouring the concrete. The opposition whines that Venezuela is all through. Sing a song for Chavez before the coup. For the moment, folks are learning how to read the Constitution. Is the people's creed from their back pocket. They'll take it out for all to see, and their motto is death or liberty. There are those who will complain, mostly the privileged few. Sing a song for Chavez before the coup. For the moment, the oil wells are flowing, and Citgo's profits know exactly where they're going. Feed the hungry, house those without a home, give the tractors to those who dig sod and loam. Maybe he will meet the fate that Allende knew. But I'll sing a song for Chavez before the coup. For the moment, the movement's on the rise, it's all happening right before our eyes. But turn on the TV and there's nothing they will say. If he's gone and we don't hear it, did it happen anyway? If the future's to be ours, I ask, what are you gonna do? Sing a song for Chavez before the coup. Sing a song for Chavez before
And they opened a Venezuela TV broadcast with that song, and then had Chavez speaking one time. I was at the COP15 when I was one of many different musicians opening for Chavez at a big theater in the Velbø neighborhood in Copenhagen. A high point of my career, though. I didn't get to meet the man. Heard him speak, though, and he didn't even need to speak Spanish to understand his speech, because it was all like "long live this" and "long live that." It was a nice speech for the Spanish ignorant audience. I figured that he did that for all the Danes, figuring like, okay, if he just says "long live this" and "long live that," there's enough things that they're going to understand, so they don't need translation, you know. Although there was translation from Spanish to Danish, which did not help me very much. Anyway, war-torn Colombia became one of the last remaining countries in South America to be suffering under the U.S. free trade tutelage. In Colombia, they do what the corporate leaders like to do best with community leaders and union organizers. They shoot them.
Coke came to Colombia, seeking lower wages. They got just what they came for, but as we turn the pages, we find the workers do not like the sound of their children's hungry cries. So they said, we'll join the union. They began to organize. So Coke called up a terrorist group called the AUC. Said, we've got some problems at the factory. The AUC went to the plant, killed 2 union men, told the rest, you leave the union or we'll be back again. Well, Coke did not complain about this dirty deed. Why give workers higher wages when Coke is all they really need? They phoned the AUC, said thanks, without you we'd go broke. And to show our appreciation, here's 100 cases of Coke. The baby drinks it in his bottle and the water ain't no good. The dog drinks it, but he don't know if he should. Some folks say it's the nectar of the gods, but Coke is the drink of the death squads. Coke is the drink of the death squads. Well, these workers wouldn't take this situation lying down. Some went up to Georgia, said, look what's happened to our town. You American workers get downsized, as for us we just get shot. And those of us who live, our teeth begin to rot. 'Cause the baby drinks it in his bottle and the water ain't no good. The dog drinks it, but he don't know if he should. Some folks say it's the nectar of the gods, but Coke is the drink of the death squads. Coke is the drink of the death squads. Well, now that's the situation. What are you gonna do? 'Cause the death squads run Colombia and they're paid by me and you. We can let Coke rule the world, see what future that will bring. Or we can drink juice and smash the state. Now that's the real thing. 'Cause the baby drinks it in his bottle and the water ain't no good. The dog drinks it, but he don't know if he should. Some folks say it's the nectar of the gods, but Coke is the drink of the death squads. Coke is the drink of the death squads.
The movement in the U.S. against the free trade pushing corporate elite and their Democratic and Republican servants was put on the map with the protests outside the World Trade Organization meetings in Seattle in 1999, and faced a crossroads during the protests against the free trade area of the Americas meetings in Miami in 2003, with wanton and extreme police brutality as well as many underhanded police tactics and outrageously biased media reporting, combined with the psychological aftermath of 9/11, since after 9/11 the lines in the eyes of the corporate media between peaceful protesters and Al-Qaeda suicide bombers became blurred.
Leaders of the world had gathered to make the planet freer for free trade, to create a better business climate for all the profits they had made. Surrounded by an army, there for their defense, armed with APCs and copters and lots of common sense. Behind a fence, behind a wall that shouts you shall not pass. Broken skulls, plastic bullets, and 1,000 gallons of tear gas. And the world leaders kept on talking behind the moat upon the hill, and they boasted of prosperity in their latest free trade bill. They thank God, they thank Boeing, they thank the World Bank, they thank the firepower of the M1 tank. They defended their positions and the glory of their class, with broken skulls, plastic bullets, and 1,000 gallons of tear gas. On the streets we chanted, we have no clubs or guns. We've just come to tell the people the evil ways this system runs. But the truth can set us free, the rulers all knew well. So they drowned the truth with copters and the ringing of the bell, with their tasers on our bodies and our faces in the grass. Broken skulls, plastic bullets, and 1,000 gallons of tear gas. Cameras hid behind the lines, 500,000 men in blue. When the rich men moved their lips, they recorded them on cue. The occupation of a city by an army of police wasn't worthy of a mention from the reporters of the piece. Neither were the wounded children or the boarded glass, or the broken skulls, plastic bullets, and 1,000 gallons of tear gas.
I was at the Miami protests, as an aside here, and it was there were many notable moments that were very pleasant, though, and one of them, I mean, mixed, of course, but one of the stories I heard right from the horse's mouth, only, I don't know, hours or minutes after it happened, was I ran into Dave Blakeney there. There were lots of folks there from all over North America, and including, I think, at least a few hundred people from Canada, including lots of members of the Canadian Labour Congress. And Dave was telling me about how there was this union meeting going on in a hotel, and outside of this meeting, there were students and others from around the country, around the world, getting savagely beaten by the police for no apparent reason. And other than the police had said they had to get off the streets, and of course they had nowhere to go, and that sort of thing. And Dave, or one of the CLC people, pointed out to some of the people from the AFL-CIO in the U.S. that this police brutality was happening out there, and somebody from the AFL-CIO said, "Those aren't our people getting attacked." And at which point, I don't remember if it was Dave or somebody else from the CLC said, "Yes, they are." And I believe it was, if I recall, 100 members of the CLC that went out and stood between the police and the people they were attacking, and the police backed off. When the purveyors of free trade make plans to have a big meeting of the elites, they like to have them in places where protests aren't allowed, like Qatar and Russia. If they have them in the U.S., they like to have John Timoney running the police department. They like him because he's an anti-democratic thug with a well-deserved reputation of undermining the rule of law and violating civil rights on a massive scale. Now he's training cops in Bahrain.
Wanna have a protest in the USA? Wanna speak your mind in the American way? If there are some rich white men with whom you disagree and thought you have the right of assembly, there's a man you should know, 'cause he will follow you wherever you go. John Timoney, butcher for hire. He's a brutal thug and a dirty liar. He's a cop among cops, a man among men, and oh my God, he's back again. He'll protect our freedom in his own special way by smashing in your face today. He'll spray tear gas in your eyes. He'll look into the camera and tell lies, and if you complain the deal is raw, he will declare martial law. John Timoney, butcher for hire. He's a brutal thug and a dirty liar. He's a cop among cops, a man among men, and oh my God, he's back again. He'll ban dancing, he'll ban art, he'll ban medics on go-karts, he'll ban meetings, he'll ban signs, he'll ban circles, he'll ban lines. He'll stand up upon his throne and say, go back to your free speech zone. John Timoney, butcher for hire. He's a brutal thug and a dirty liar. He's a cop among cops, a man among men, and oh my God, he's back again. But someday he'll meet his end. He's already halfway round the bend. He'll take stock of what he's done, stare at the notches on his gun. He'll look into the mirror and at his poor wife and say, oh my God, I've been a scumbag my whole life. John Timoney, butcher for hire. He's a brutal thug and a dirty liar. He's a cop among cops, a man among men, and oh my God, he's back again. John Timoney, butcher for hire. He's a brutal thug and a dirty liar. He's a cop among cops, a man among men, and oh my God, he's back again.
Let's see, what have I done here? This was going pretty smoothly, and now, here we go. Another free trade advocate who has worked lots in both the U.S. and the Middle East is Paul Wolfowitz. He went from being one of the main people in charge of privatizing the Iraqi economy at the point of a gun to running the World Bank and trying to implement those kinds of draconian policies on a more global scale.
He's done giving orders to generals. He's moved to another sphere. He's through with ordering the tanks to kill. He's gonna do something different this year. He's moving from Virginia to Washington with a neocon to thank. He's through with the War Department. Now he's gonna run the World Bank. He said he'd be true to the mission, that hunger and want should end. And as all Afghans know, he's a man of his word. On that we can't depend. So be prepared for prosperity. It's coming to your door. 'Cause there will be no poverty once we kill off all the poor. Last week he was bombing cities, now he's a financier. Pay your debts or say goodbye, Paul Wolfowitz is here. He'll bring the world things it needs, such as nuclear power, giant dams and hamburgers. No doubt he's a man of the hour. He's proven it over and over with finesse and aplomb. And for those who disagree, well, then he's got the bomb. Last week he was bombing cities, now he's a financier. Pay your debts or say goodbye, Paul Wolfowitz is here.
real American, so he must know best. He'll lead us to glory on this many can attest. He'll lead us to freedom, and we will be so glad, just like those shoppers in that market in downtown Baghdad. Last week he was bombing cities, now he's a financier. Pay your debts or say goodbye, Paul Wolfowitz is here.
On the other side of the Atlantic, the European Union continued to embrace more and more free trade-style reforms, deregulating banking, privatizing trains, prisons, formerly public utilities like water, etc., going in the opposite direction of much of South America and becoming more and more like the USA.
I landed in Denmark, headed to my favorite squat, but it was bought by right-wing Christians and was now a parking lot. I went to Christiania to try to find some peace, but the pushers were replaced by an army of police. Went to the Vestas factory to see my buddy Floyd, but they had laid off half the workforce, now he was unemployed. I went to Blågårdsplatz for some espresso and a scone, but then I got arrested for being in a riot zone. Yeah, welcome to the European Union. It's evolving every day, getting more and more like the USA. I spied an ugly building like a prison, if you please. Noticed this was where they now kept the refugees. No more social democratic brotherhood of man. Now it's send back and let them manage if they can. No more protecting draft dodgers who didn't want to go. Now it's send in the Marines and fight the evil foe. Now it's nations run by xenophobes who talk of culture wars. Forget about the Renaissance, it's time to fight the Moors. Yeah, welcome to the European Union. It's evolving every day, getting more and more like the USA. I went to see a friend outside of town, not so far, but the bus line has been cut, now you have to have a car. Where there used to be a farm like a little slice of heaven, now there's a McDonald's and a 7-Eleven. I went to see the doctor, but then I realized the doctor wasn't there and the place was privatized. The poor are going hungry while the rich are growing fat. I don't know quite what happened, but I smell a rat. Yeah, welcome to the European Union. It's evolving every day, getting more and more like the USA. Welcome to the European Union. It's evolving every day, getting more and more like the USA.
And then came another financial meltdown. Many countries around the world went into a spiraling economic tailspin, requiring massive bailouts with no hope of paying off the loans without selling most of their country's assets to the IMF. Massive banks were bailed out at taxpayer expense, while millions of people lost their homes and their savings.
It can happen in a moment. Sometimes it does, when what could be is and what shouldn't be was. There are times when you gotta stand steady. There are other times when you gotta be ready. The window can open, it seems so wide, but you can never tell when it's gonna slam shut. One day you're a target on the firing ranges. The next day all of a sudden everything changes. When it all Well, then the scene is revealed, and you're on top of the hill. At that point, you know you can let it go by, or spread your wings and take to the sky. When it all comes crashing down. But sometimes all that's real is what you do. Some moments are coming, others have came, and then there are those when you just gotta take aim. When it all comes crashing down. When it all comes crashing down. Crashing down. When it all comes crashing down.
In different parts of the world, people dealt with the economic crisis in different ways. In many South American countries, they further rejected the free trade model of perpetual underdevelopment, strengthening a political and economic bloc that very purposefully excluded the U.S. In Somalia, the economy had been in a shambles for quite some time, and in addition to the legacy of colonialism and the corrupt puppet governments that had long ago run the country into the ground, foreign corporations had taken advantage of the lack of a functioning government to dump nuclear waste off the Somali coast for years, helping to destroy the once vibrant fisheries there. So many people in Somalia did what desperate people have done for centuries. They raided the ships belonging to those transnational corporations. Where were we? Who were mainly responsible for creating and maintaining the tremendous global inequalities in the first place.
Let me tell you the story of 100 ships traversing the great big sea, moving the riches of the world in large ships owned by the captains of industry. They were heading to places like Amsterdam, London, and LA. But they had to change their plans a bit when they were held up on the way. Here's to the pirates of Somalia, sailing the ocean blue. Here's to the pirates of Somalia, I'll raise a Jolly Roger to you. Harad Harry is a town of fishermen, living lives of hardship and toil. But today they had a really good catch, 2 million barrels of oil. They travel with the Pirate's Handbook, doing what's just and fair, taxing the robber barons and taking their rightful share. Here's to the pirates of Somalia, sailing the ocean blue. Here's to the pirates of Somalia, I'll raise a Jolly Roger to you. Well, there are those who don't like pirates, but I think they're just great. I only wish that I could shake their hands and say, good job, mate. I only wish that I could join them on the seas, keep those tankers at bay, tax the corporations and give the loot away. Here's to the pirates of Somalia, sailing the ocean blue. Here's to the pirates of Somalia, I'll raise a Jolly Roger to you. Here's to the pirates of Somalia, sailing the ocean blue.
Here's to the pirates of Somalia. I'll raise a Jolly Roger to you.
In Greece, huge numbers of people and canines alike protested against their government's complicity in the global financial collapse and their leaders' collective inability to stand up to the institutions who had created the problem. Massive protests often turned into riots, and the financial district of Athens was torched repeatedly.
Lots of folks are revolting. They've had enough of this shit. The rich are getting richer. They're saying that's it. But with Luke it's different, that's clear. As he emerges from the fog, let's hear it for Lukanikos, the riot dog. It's a fight between people, but he is no pawn. He knows exactly which side he's on. In the machine of capital, he is no cog. Let's hear it for Lukanikos, the riot dog. He barks at the cops, and he has no fear. He stands his ground when the batons are near. He's got a fan page on Facebook, but he's got no time for a blog. Let's hear it for Lukanikos, the riot dog. When a smoke bomb comes towards him, he kicks it back at the fuzz. No, he acts a bit different than a normal dog does. No time to lie in the sun or go swim in the bog. Let's hear it for Lukanikos, the riot dog. Let's hear it for Lukanikos, the riot dog.
The acoustic version. You can go onto YouTube and find the animated electric punk rock version of it as well, if you like. It's good. Far less well known than the pirates in Somalia or the riots of Greece were the peaceful protests in Iceland and the elections which brought to power a government that rejected the bank bailouts on offer and started procedures to protect underwater homeowners and jail bankers. After taking these actions, although in many ways still economically isolated from the rest of the world, Iceland is doing a hell of a lot better than Greece.
Iceland is an island with 500,000 or so Vikings, mostly known for volcanoes, hot springs, and fishing, known for its welfare state, for being good and socialistic. Certainly not known for being corrupt or nepotistic, but in the USA and Europe, when they were deregulating banks, Iceland's politicians took bribes and joined their ranks. Soon you had a situation one would think just couldn't be. A bank whose debt was worth 10 times the country's GDP. When Wall Street imploded, sure enough it spread. Banks all over the world were floating in the red. All over the world, governments made the plan to cut spending and raise taxes on the working woman and working man. The banks were bailed out while the people had to pay. But in Iceland, people thought there must be a better way. And the earth stood still a moment. Fear was struck in every toff when Iceland told the bankers. Iceland told the bankers. When Iceland told the bankers to fuck off. Folks were in the streets in Reykjavik and just couldn't be ignored. They said this is a debt we Icelanders can't afford. Let's guarantee deposits of all our people, yes indeed. But as for all the speculators motivated by their greed to make really dumb investments, to them Iceland said good luck. Sorry for your losses, but we don't really give a fuck. The 1% all trembled when they took away the trough. When Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers to fuck off. The UK called them terrorists, said we cannot let this stand. Who do these peacenik blondes think they are in Iceland? They threatened isolation and economy in flames, but the Icelanders said sorry, but the banks can settle their own claims, though that might be harder for them now that they're under house arrest. Or else they fled the country as they were most unwelcome guests. And now Reykjavik's recovery just makes a fat cat sputter and cough, since Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers to fuck off. If you haven't heard of this example, perhaps there's a reason why the owners of the world don't want this kind of shit to fly. They say we all must pay up in this shakedown by the mob if we can't afford to pay the rent cause we don't have a job. They say it's not their problem if we're forever shackled by their debt. We must save the 1% from the fate they should have met. But there is an alternative, though it makes the fat cat scoff, that Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers to fuck off. When Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers to fuck off.
As a result of the financial collapse and the policies of deregulation and privatization for decades that led to it, stratification of wealth in the U.S. reached a new high. It was now the worst it had been since 1929. Although taxes in the U.S. are higher for the average person than they are in Japan, the U.S. has so much less to show for them, because half of those federal taxes are spent on the military and other worse-than-useless things. But the idea of doing the obvious, such as cutting military spending or significantly raising taxes on the rich, are not even acceptable topics for discussion in Congress.
500 or so rich men in the Congress are engaged in some most serious debate, along with a few thousand lobbyists. They will now decide the world's fate. They say we're running out of dough, and the people all must take another hit. Well, there are some things that I know, and what they're saying is, I'm not a mathematician, but one doesn't have to be too deft to see if 1% of us owns half the wealth. That leaves 99% to share what's left. And then if 60 cents on each tax dollar is buying bombs to blow the planet into bits, then I think we need to grab them by the collar and patiently explain to them that that's tax the rich, tax the rich. Close the loopholes so none of them can fudge it. Bring 'em home, and eliminate the military budget. They say we cannot pay for health care, nor for decent schools to educate the kids. Sorry if you don't have shoes to wear, but this recession has just left us in the skids. They say we can't afford those windmills after all, so just stiffen up and show a little grit.
And if climate change and poverty have gotten you down, just sing, oh say, can you see? Tax the rich, tax the rich. Close the loopholes so none of them can fudge it. Bring 'em home, bring 'em home. And eliminate the military budget. They say we've got to fight those terrorists. They say we've got to send our kids to war. Just ignore that corporation behind the flag and don't ask us what the hell they're fighting for. I hear GE is subsidized, leaving us fools to pay for it. They shirk their duties while we downsize. I know what that's called. Tax the rich, tax the rich. Close the loopholes so none of them can fudge it. Bring 'em home, bring 'em home. And eliminate the military budget. Tax the rich, tax the rich. Close the loopholes so none of them can fudge it. Bring 'em home, bring 'em home. And eliminate the military budget.
Deregulation and privatization over the decades have been Republican-led initiatives, but contrary to popular mythology, the Democratic leadership has long been supportive of those policies as well. If only the things the Republicans say about the Democrats were true, there might be some hope within the electoral system to take on these advocates of free trade. But a recent study pretty much sums up the problem. The average Democrat in Congress is actually wealthier than the average Republican.
I turned on my TV, though it was hard to see these men who would be head of state. What a great country from sea to shining sea. We watched the Republicans debate. Newt stood with his third wife and said, "You bet your life the president is a red." He wants to tax the rich a lot, take your limo and your yacht. He wants to have the bankers' heads. And if he gets in again, he'll beat the White House pig, and then he'll hire Chavez as his VP. Then we'll be right on track to give capitalism the sack, along with the insurance industry. If only it were true, if only it were true, I'd be so happy, wouldn't you? If only it were true, if only it were true, if only it were true. He'll give everyone food stamps and wheelchair ramps. He'll subsidize windmills and maple syrup. He'll cripple industries with eco-friendly policies, and pretty soon we will be just like Europe. He'll shut down oil wells, give out solar cells to every home in Delaware and Illinois. He'll ban logging in the parks. He'll send the works of Karl Marx to the homes of every American girl and boy. He'll abolish pesticides. He'll be giving out free rides and free lunches too in his high-speed trains. He'll start lots of public works full of union perks. He'll fill all the cities up with bicycle lanes. If only it were true, if only it were true, I'd be so happy, wouldn't you? If only it were true, if only it were true, if only it were true. Watch out, his critics tell, this shall be our death knell. He'll pull the troops out and end all of our wars. He'll gut military spending, our empire will be ending, and soon we'll be invaded by the Moors. He'll legalize all drugs, give away beer mugs and hookahs to every child, and Korans. He'll ban religions from the schools, give 40 acres and a mule to every person who makes less than 50 grand. He'll close Guantanamo, to torture he'll say no. He'll make us all drive electric cars. He'll reinstate the fairness doctrine, take off that damn flag pin, and he'll put Rupert Murdoch behind bars. If only it were true, if only it were true, I'd be so happy, wouldn't you? If only it were true, if only it were true, if only it were true. If only it were true, if only it were true, I'd be so happy, wouldn't you? If only it were true, if only it were true, if only it were true.
The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that corporations are people too. And of course, presidential candidate Mitt Romney famously agreed with that assessment. In a way, this ruling sort of legally completed the process of moving from a government that at least pretended to understand itself as a democratic one, representing the human population of the country, to one that was now openly representing the corporations. No more backroom bribery, just perfectly legal lobbying, with unlimited funds now to even further promote the free trade agenda that led to the financial collapse and so much more destruction.
A corporation doesn't have to feed a family. A corporation cannot be unemployed. A corporation can't get carpal tunnel syndrome, heart disease, brain tumors, or hemorrhoids. A corporation is set up with one motive, and that is not to judge who's right or fair. A corporation's only goal is making money. That's why a corporation doesn't care. A corporation can never sense the breeze upon its skin, never know what it's like to miss a meal. A corporation doesn't have to worry, because a corporation cannot feel. A corporation can never know the beauty. It cannot wake up in a grove of ancient trees. It only sees $100,000 and some mill jobs it can ship out overseas. A corporation can't care for a child sickened by a toxic oil spill. A corporation only stands to profit from interest on the loan for the hospital bill. A corporation never goes to funerals of any victims who may die along the way. A corporation cannot feel remorse. A corporation never really has to pay. A corporation doesn't have a mouth, but it often has many a mouthpiece. A corporation cannot shoot a gun, but it can employ an army of police. A corporation can never go to prison, no matter how horrible the crime. But a corporation can send lobbyists to Congress to make sure that more of us are doing time. Corporation doesn't feel the pain of a child raised by a TV set, and the corporations will just get bailed out if their clients fall too deeply into debt. Corporations can't be rounded up and shot. A corporation can't be tortured through the night. A corporation can't be blown up by an IED. A corporation cannot even see the sight. A corporation can't be killed by a tsunami. A corporation cannot drown beneath the tide. A corporation doesn't care who wins the war if they can just sell weapons to both sides. A corporation exists only to make money. A corporation never questions why. A corporation doesn't suffer consequences because a corporation doesn't live and doesn't die. A corporation doesn't have to feed a family.
For an awfully long time, a lot of people were wondering if there was ever going to be a popular response in the U.S. to the corruption, to the vastly expanding inequality, to the use of taxpayer money to bail out some of the world's richest corporations, while they turned around and took the bailout money in order to give their executives multi-million-dollar bonuses. Then came Occupy Wall Street. And then came 7,000 arrests, large helpings of police brutality, as well as police infiltration and spying on a large scale, as recent revelations have shown.
Because this is where they buy the politicians. Because this is where power has its seat. Because 99% of us are suffering at the mercy of the madmen on this street. Because all of us are victims of class warfare being waged on us by the 1%. Because these greedy banksters rob the country, leaving us without the means to pay the rent. Because the last time that we had a decent government was about 1932. Because we the people are supposed to run this country, but instead it's all run by and for the few. Because now we know the rich do not pay taxes, but when they need a hand, it's us who bail them out. Because we suspected we lived in a plutocracy, but suddenly of late there is no doubt. So we're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. Because both my parents lost their savings. Because I have never opened an account. Because the interest on my credit card just doubled, and now I can't pay the minimum amount. Because these budget cuts are just immoral, that our schools as overcrowded as they are. Because there are no buses where I live, but I can't afford to drive a car. Because so many of us don't have health insurance. The rest of us have it, but it sucks. Because the rich are flying in their private jets, while the rest of us are slogging through the muck. Because capitalism isn't working. This system has just failed to produce. Because the 1% are prospering, while the rest of us just suffer their abuse. So we're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. Because it has been demonstrated amply that the winners are the ones who stick around. Because this world should belong to everyone, not just the banksters who had smashed it to the ground. Because we've noticed voting doesn't change things when the politicians are mostly millionaires. Because we're learning how to stand up like Tunisians, like they did in Tahrir Square. Where a young man named Mohammed Bouazizi struck a match that lit up all the earth. And all around the world the spell was broken, and a movement for the future was in birth. Because there's only so much the rich can feed us before we figure out which side we're on. Because we've learned if we want our liberation, it will only come if we stay here till the rising of the dawn. So we're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. Because corporations are not people, and we can't just let them choose. Because if we leave our fate to them, then all of us will surely lose. Because the climate clock is ticking, and we can't just leave our world behind. Because
'cause corporate rule isn't working. And it's time for humans' hearts and minds, because you can't take it with you. Because the rich just do not care. Because it doesn't matter how much you make, but how much you can share. Because these moments don't come often. Because we want truly to be free. Because we know what really matters. Something called society. So we're gonna stay right here. 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 We're gonna stay right here.
Pharmaceutical companies, Hollywood, and the music industry teamed up to try to pass legislation in the U.S., Europe, and elsewhere that would cause drug prices to skyrocket and have people imprisoned for downloading music and movies, among other bad things. The idea was to further protect these industries, using the threat of imprisonment and lots of government regulation, all in the name of free trade and intellectual property rights. So government regulation is good when it comes to protecting corporations, but bad when it comes to protecting real people. Large numbers of people responded, particularly in Eastern Europe, with protests and other forms of organizing campaigns. And SOPA, PIPA, and ACTA were all defeated for the time being.
People are marching against the chiefs of industry who are trying to protect their intellectual property. Secret negotiations to make a secret deal. They've got Warner Brothers, Sony, and the presidential seal. They say they lobby on behalf of you and me. I say, steal this MP3. 50 years ago, what some call the golden age, Indie FM was the king. The world was a stage. Independent labels made records by the score. Enter 2012, now there are only 4. I've got words for these plutocrats who claim to represent me. Steal this MP3. In between commercials, they play nothing but the hits, and they hope to placate all of us with Lady Gaga's tits. They laid off all their staff before the PC was invented. Now they blame the world that their profits have been dented. The 1% is trying to get their fee. Steal this MP3. Steal it. Who line their pockets while the rest of us get screwed. It could all be a comedy if it weren't so crude. They want to arrest you for sharing knowledge, for violating copyright. To quote my friend Attila, these capitalists are a blight. They don't care about the culture, they just want your money. Steal this MP3. The people don't want censorship by that name or another. They don't want your files searched by corporate Big Brother. And if it's up to most of us, no one would sign your bill just so Hollywood and Pharma can make another pill. So from the Mekong Delta to the Mediterranean Sea, steal this MP3. Steal this MP3. Steal this MP3. delta to the Mediterranean Sea.
Steal this MP3.
Free trade is not only bad for humans because of the tendency of the free traders to try to profit off of every possible intellectual idea or piece of research anyone has ever done, to the point where they make it impossible for anyone to use a lot of available research without paying for patents they can't afford to pay for. Free trade has also been absolutely devastating in the world of culture, since it's most profitable just to promote a small number of well-known musicians and ignore all of the rest of them, regardless of talent or potential appeal. The free traders have created a sort of monoculture, doing the same thing to music that they do to agriculture. The influence of the free traders is so far-reaching that even much of the ostensibly independent media unwittingly play right along.
Again last night, happens every time I play. When the gig is over, someone has to say a question that appears to be on everybody's brains as they're driving down the highway in the commuter lanes. It sure is not just me, it's the 99% of artists who are wondering about the thousands they just spent on a CD that will never make it to the air. Now all of us are grown-ups here. The question is one I'd really like to know. Why don't they play you on the radio? Why don't they play you on the radio? Perhaps my songs are too cerebral. They don't make you dance. My melodies are boring. There's no spandex in my pants. Maybe it's because I don't use a drum machine. Maybe I'm too red, or maybe I'm too green. Folks just don't want to hear it. They don't want to analyze anything more complex than the space between your thighs. Maybe I should wear more glitter, go to parties in an egg. Perhaps I need to go electric or show a bit more leg. But it's something I must wonder at the end of every show. Why don't they play you on the radio? Why don't they play you on the radio? There's an exception to each and every rule, but perhaps I'm too political and not a useful tool to keep the music in the background and the commercials in the fore, to keep the shoppers shopping, not protesting the war, to keep the lemmings humming the same 300 songs, the songs they play throughout the year, each night and all day long. Maybe I just don't make the grade to be one of the chosen few. Perhaps there was a sign somewhere or I need to change my name to Bruce or Silvio. Why don't they play you on the radio? Why don't they play you on the radio? Commitment, I'm insufficiently resolved. Or maybe there just aren't a million people who might buy more records made by some whiny left-wing guy. Or maybe they would, but I'm just out of luck because I don't have a label that can spend $1 million because Sony and Clear Channel have taken over everything, and you've got to pay the piper if you want to make the piper sing. It's the king who tells the piper where to go. Why don't they play you on the radio? Why don't they play you on the radio? Why don't they play you on the radio? Why don't they play you on the radio?
One way that free trade propagandists have tried to deal with the mass poverty they've created is to redefine notions of class. So people who formerly would have thought of themselves as poor or working class are now meant to think of themselves as middle class or lower middle class. No one tries to define what middle means, since it's not in the middle of anything that anyone cares to acknowledge. But if everybody who's barely scraping by is, at least, employed somewhere, thinks of themselves as middle class, maybe the belief that they're doing okay will keep them pacified, or even if in actuality they're not doing okay at all.
The average annual income of the richest 1% is about 700 grand. The average annual income of the poorest 1% is a couple food stamps and a pile of sand. Smack dab in the middle, 350,000. Well, that's actually the top 4%. Most everybody else, say in the bottom 80, is struggling to pay their mortgage or their rent. You who say you're in the middle, I wonder what you mean. In the middle of what and what? I'd say you're probably full of something that hopefully soon will be coming out of your butt. I can join you in your fantasy, but I think I'll have to pass and just say welcome, welcome to the working class. Welcome to the working class. If you're wondering how you might send your kids to college, if your savings is smaller than your debt, if your main mode of transport is an auto or a pickup, not a helicopter or a private jet, if you drive yourself to the supermarket, you know where to find the milk upon the shelf. If you bring the groceries home, then you cook the food all by yourself. If your idea of a night out is ordering takeout and watching a DVD, if your idea of social mobility is the fact that you have broadband and a high-definition TV, you can try to convince me that you're in the bourgeoisie, or you can just stop smoking that grass and let me say welcome to the working class. Welcome, welcome to the working class. If half your income's spent on taxes, no second home on a tropic isle, if flying in economy and renting a car is your notion of vacationing in style, if you've never seen the world's 7 wonders, and you think you probably never will, because you only get 2 weeks holiday each year, and you just don't have the time to kill. If you think because you're employed and you have a roof over your heads that you're so very privileged because your kids sleep in separate beds, but you can't afford the rest home for your parents, and it's you who's got to wipe their asses, well then let me say welcome, welcome to the working class. Welcome, welcome to the working class.
The same politicians and corporate spokespeople who promote free trade also claim to be environmentalists. This, however, is impossible. Those who promote free trade are promoting the outsourcing of manufacturing jobs to countries that have no environmental standards to speak of. Thus, they are encouraging massive polluting and a massive rise in carbon emissions globally. And then, on top of that, they have the gall to talk about energy independence, as if more oil drilling and fracking and the inevitable spills and leaks resulting from it will do anything other than exacerbate the problem. Real energy independence would mean massive government investment in windmills and solar panels, not offshore oil drilling, fracking, mining tar sands, creating more wastelands, and shipping the dirty stuff through aquifers in pipelines. And opposing such development or supporting other development are both considered to be non-tariff barriers to trade, which is very bad, apparently.
As soon as they started drilling for oil, they started building pipelines on the seabed through the forests and across the border lines. As soon as they started laying the pipe, they said, we'll do this safely. There will never be an accident. We can do this carefully. But the sands shift, the ice melts, disasters are routine. Point out their record of destruction, and they'll say their hands are clean. Point out their woeful deeds, and they'll consult their banker and say it's safer to use a pipeline than an oil tanker. So now they want to see how far their madness it can go. A pipeline from the tar sands to the Gulf of Mexico. A pipeline from the tar sands to the Gulf of Mexico. The tar sands lie in the north, beneath Alberta's ground. As the price of oil rises, the oil men have found. Now there's profit to be made in a madman's dream by drilling deep beneath earth, blasting it with steam, bulldozing the land, melting what's inside. A record of extinction 1,000 miles wide. But laying waste to the northern plains is evidently not enough. The capitalists need markets where they can sell this toxic stuff. So across the farms and prairies, the oil now must flow. A pipeline from the tar sands to the Gulf of Mexico. A pipeline from the tar sands to the Gulf of Mexico. Governors oppose it, and every native band. Ranchers don't want it passing through their land. Union leaders have denounced it, as have the rank and file. The president delayed it for just a little while. They say you can't stop progress. I hope that isn't true, 'cause if we mine the tar sands, if we let the pipeline through, it will be a pipeline to oblivion, a pipeline to the end, a pipeline to a future with nothing round the bend, a pipeline to a future that I hope we'll never know. A pipeline from the tar sands to the Gulf of Mexico. A pipeline from the tar sands to the Gulf of Mexico. Pipeline from the tar sands to the Gulf of Mexico.
I will conclude this marathon musical history of free trade, or something like that, with one more song, which is the song I wrote and the subject that made me think there should be such a show on this, because I'll be hopefully participating in lots of different events coming up in Germany and elsewhere, opposed to the TTIP, which is the European-U.S. version of the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the latest, thing. And so thank you all for listening, and for those who are downloading this later or listening live, whether you've joined the chat room or not, thanks for hanging around, and hope to see you on the road and in the streets, and in the subscribe button in my website, if you feel like doing that. And here's the last song and the intro preceding it. And now the elites in the U.S. and many other countries have decided that the WTO and other free trade agreements are not enough. There's still too much power in the hands of elected officials and not enough power in unelected corporate boardrooms, and they want to fix that problem once and for all with an unprecedentedly huge trade deal, or two unprecedentedly huge trade deals, one between the U.S. and Asia and one between the U.S. and Europe. If passed, the TPP and the TTIP would even further restrict the ability of national governments to impose regulations on things like pollution, workplace safety standards, food standards, wages, and much more. These agreements also sneak ACTA in through the back door, with all the negotiations being kept secret, conducted by corporate representatives. The intention, then, is to get the Congress to pass it as one big trade agreement without being able to make any adjustments, fast-track style, preferably without reading what's inside it. The question remains, whose world is this, and how are we going to stop the free traders from completely destroying it?
Free traders and traders, bankers and thieves are at it once again. WTO didn't cut it, so now there's no telling when they'll pass into transnational class wars. They want fast-track authority so they can get the job done right, by which they need no discussion, don't even pretend to put up a fight, as they take from us our government's ability to regulate what happens within the borders of what they used to call the state, and what they used to call democracy, the idea that people have a say in whether we should be building windmills or fracking our lives away, whether banking regulations are a good idea or not, whether the food on your kitchen table comes from a Monsanto plot, whether the poor should die or have affordable medication, whether human life is less important than your corporation, whether this world is a commons or just a free trade bill that we need about as much as we need another oil spill. So let's do like we do in the WC and flush the TPP. They'll say it'll help the economy, and they've said it all before, like when they implemented NAFTA in 1994. The U.S. had lost 1 million jobs, of this there is no doubt, and in Mexico small farmers were almost completely wiped out, and when the refugees started streaming in, they were treated just like tools in the great game of the oligarchs, the old divide and rule. Just like J.P. Morgan said, why worry, he laughed, when I can pay half the working class to kill the other half. So let's do like we do in the WC and flush the TPP. SOPA, PUPA, ACTA, they couldn't get them passed, so now they've snuck them all into TPP. Try running that one up the mask in the back rooms. No one knows which corporation speaks, except when secret documents get sent to WikiLeaks. And it's only from the whistleblowers we even know it's there. One for Asia, one for Europe. Free trade everywhere. Free trade, free pollution, freedom for the billionaires, enslavement for the rest of us. But hey, they got theirs, so let's do like we do in the WC and flush the TPP. Let's do like we do in the WC and flush the TPP.
And that'll do it for this show, everybody. Thanks for listening, and I will see you around. And I should mention maybe, too, that on March 30th, on Sunday, March 30th at 1 p.m. Pacific Time, 4 p.m. New York Time, I believe 5 p.m. in Halifax, I'll be doing April in History and Song, and then I will be heading off to Europe. And find out more about that at davidrovics.com, and I'll hope to see folks around here and there, back here in Portland and wherever else. Bye for now.